Today we are going to take a look at one of the most common use cases for a plugin called WP Popup Maker. In the back end of WordPress, it's just listed as Popup Maker. We have checked our plugins list, and the most recent version of Popup Maker is active, so we know we'll be able to use all of its most recent features. So this is where the plugin lives, and these are all the pop-ups that are on the site now. These ones that we have made before are click-based pop-ups that pop up and they're attached to individual buttons for our virtual tours and our apartment gallery, the photo galleries for each one. What we're going to look at today, though, instead is a timer-based pop-up. So this is going to be the pop-up that you have automatically show when someone first visits the website to let them know about any recent promotions. So I've made a draft of one that can be reused as often as you need it. And it's been used a bit before. You can see that it's had a lot of opens. So you click on the title to edit it, or the edit button. Either of them go to the same place. And here on the page is you're going to be building this pop-up's content the same way that you would build it on a page itself. So it's these Visual Composer blocks is how we're doing it with this template. Or I guess it's called WP Bakery Page Builder now. It used to be called Visual Composer, and anyway, if I call it that, that's just a vestige of the past. It's called WP Bakery Page Builder now. So we have a bit to look at before we dive into our content, and that's just how we're setting it up and what controls how it shows and where it shows and how often it shows, things along those lines, what it looks like. So these controls are all in these tabs on the left. The triggers tab is what controls how the pop-up is shown. So the main two ways, at least in this basic version of the plugin, are click-based or timer-based. And so in this case, we have a timer. And I'm just going to go ahead and set these options up from scratch so that you can understand what they do. So if you were starting a new pop-up, which you won't need to, if you just want to reuse this one, that's totally fine. And then you won't have to reset these anymore, but it's useful to know how these work. So triggers. We're going to add a new trigger. We're going to change this from the default of click open to the time delay or auto open. And since we are showing this to them on a timer and it's not based on them clicking on a button and wanting to see it, we only want this to show up one time, and after they've seen it, we want to stop bothering them so that it's not showing up on every single page. If this were a click trigger, we would want it to pop up every time that they clicked the element that we attached the pop-up to, because they're telling us they want to see it when they click it, so you wouldn't want to prevent it from showing again if they're asking for it to show. But in this case, where we're forcing that upon them, we want to make sure that they only see it once per certain amount of time period. Usually once per day is what I set these sort of promotional pop-ups to. So we're going to tell it to set a cookie, which is just a little packet of information on the browser that says, hey, this person saw this pop-up, don't show it to them again if they come back within the set time frame. And we're going to have this cookie get set when they close the pop-up. This way, if they open the first page and then without closing the pop-up click to a second page, the pop-up will come back up until they tell it to close. This is the default option. We're going to leave it here. So this next page is how long after the page loads do we want to pop the pop-up up. Now, it would be perfectly acceptable to make an argument that it should be up when the page first loads, but sometimes with all the different plugins going on in WordPress. There's like JavaScript that's all firing kind of at the same time. And I've had experiences where if the pop-up triggers too soon, it some of the JavaScript that's trying to run in the background will get stuck, and then the pop-up won't actually, the close button won't work. I haven't had that experience on this site, but I've had it enough where I at least have 1 second, which would be 1,000 milliseconds, delay between when the page loads and when the pop-up fires. This allows for some of the more latent JavaScript processing to happen before the pop-up's JavaScript fires and allows it to run. So 1 second is usually where I land, but then I do a little bit of testing, make sure it's actually working. If you wanted the pop-up to be slightly more disruptive and potentially have a chance of getting someone's attention, then one mechanism to do that is to let the page load, let someone use it for a little bit, and then trigger the pop-up. In that case, that would be probably like a 5 second delay or something along those lines. This is just a matter of taste. I like it to be basically loading when the page is loading and then let someone click it off if they want to. To me, that's less invasive, that's less aggressive than the latter version. But again, it's a matter of taste. I'm going to leave it to 1 second for now. Feel free to modify. You could rename this cookie if you want to, but there's no real need to do that. So our triggers are set. Next, we can get into our targeting section. If we needed to show this pop-up in only a particular instance, so for example, let's say we only wanted it to show on the home page, then we have trigger conditions here, and we can base it on the different pages that are available to us. We have different posts, different post categories, different pages, pages that are based on, and you can select pages based on their name, based on their ID. There's also all of our different post types, so like portfolios and categories, and that's basically it. All the different types of content that you have on the website, you can target a pop-up to just show on particular content. We're not going to do that though, because we want this pop-up to show no matter what entry page someone comes into the website from. Most people are going to be coming in from the home page, but some people, depending on their Google search result, may come in from a different landing page. So we want them to see the pop-up regardless of how they access the site. So we're not going to restrict our targeting, and we still want the pop-up to show on all our different devices. So we're not going to do any disabling for smaller devices. So in this instance, we're just going to leave targeting open, wide open, all the pages, standard. So next, we can go into our display settings. This is all pretty basic, but for this promotion, I think centered is what we're going to go for. And so picking one of these presets basically configures the rest of these bars for us. So we're going to go into appearance. This is where there's like different themes that you can control from the pop-up themes option that's on the left over here. So some of that is a little, you're getting a little bit into some designy type things. It gets a little bit more advanced. It's still like, it's selection based. It's not code based, but the default theme is what we're using for our virtual tour pop-up. It's what we're using for our photo gallery pop-up. So in this case, I think the default theme, which has been specifically styled for our purposes elsewhere on the site, is going to be the nicest looking one. We can control the size, and we can change this based on if we have like less or more content that we're popping up in the website. So if you have like just 1 or 2 sentences having like a full screen, 95% of the screen pop-up is going to look a bit silly. So this is usually something that I do to taste after I put my content in, and then test it and come back and see how that is fitting the content based on the size I'm allowing it. And I tested a couple different screen sizes, which I'll show you how to do. Animation, I think there's a couple options here. I think fade is fine. You can also tell it to slide if you want to slide in from the top or bottom. You can do both animations, both fade and slide. I think fade is fine. We're going to stick with that for now. If you want to be extra annoying, you can tell it to make a sound. And if the person's sound happens to be on their computer, it will play an annoying ding. We're going to leave it off. Where it shows up. So for this particular pop-up where we're trying to get their attention, most eyeballs focus on the center of the browser screen, so we're going to do middle center. So if we wanted, it's basically what these is like vertical and then horizontal. So middle center is like middle vertically and then center horizontally. So advanced section. So if we wanted to disable the overlay, which in our case from the theme is like it washes it out and makes it white, we could do that. We're not going to do that. I do think we will make it stackable, which allows it to let other pop-ups remain open. It seems like a pretty low chance that there would be another pop-up that would be competing with this one for triggering, but just in case, this can't hurt since we're using other pop-ups on different pages, those click-based ones to control, the virtual tours and things, we're going to let this be stackable. Now, moving on to our close button. We can decide what we want our close button to do. In our case, I think the close button doesn't have text on it. I think it's just an X. We'll see in a second when we test it, but I don't think we need to override this at all. Form submission, we're not going to put a form on this one, but if we did have a form integrated with it, at least with a form plugin that this is integrated with, Contact Form 7 would be an example. That's the form plugin that we're using on the website. So this would work. If we put a form on this pop-up, then usually after that form has been submitted, the expected behavior is that the pop-up goes away because you're finished with that action. So if we were going to put a form on here, I would usually recommend having it close after the form's been submitted successfully with a little bit of a delay to like show the success message for just a moment, and then the form closes automatically. We're not doing a form in this case, so we skip that. Alternate methods. Click overlay to close. This doesn't come on by default. I put this on myself. I always put this on as long as there's no like JavaScript conflict within the interaction features inside the pop-up itself, which I've had that happen just one time. But in this case, we're not going to run into any of that. Clicking the overlay to close just makes the pop-up less invasive because it gives you more area to click off to get it out of your face if the content isn't useful or meaningful to you. So, and like often this is just what people expect to be able to do when a pop-up comes at them. Like usually there's an X button, but that's a very small portion of the screen to click on to get the distraction away from you. So allowing them to click anywhere outside of the pop-up, which is the overlay section, anywhere outside of the pop-up that will actually close it as well, makes the pop-up a little bit less abrasive. Advanced section, we don't need any of this. So that is all of our options. Let's do our content. So you had given me some text here, which I'm just gonna copy it. So we have all these different content elements here that are available to us. In this case, we can just do text, and then we can size it as appropriate as we turn the pop-up on and kind of look at it. So I'm going to just do a regular text block, which you can do in two ways. You can just do it right from this middle one, or you can do add an element and then a text block. If you wanted to put a picture in here or something like that, you could do it right from this text block thing where you add media and then pick a picture from your photo library, your media library, or you could do it with an image widget. So I just added a new element with this plus button, and then I searched for IM just to narrow it down a little bit, and I was looking for this option called single image. So if I wanted to, let's say, okay, so this is reservations begin fall 2021. Probably just something like, I don't know, take your pick. Probably just one of these rooms would be something that would be meaningful. This looks pretty good. I'm just going to use this as an example. And then I'm going to change this image size to full. And then I'm going to drag this so that the image comes first and the text comes second. And then I think that what's probably going to look best is if we center this. So reservations for fall begin September 28th. Reserve your apartment. Oh, that came over from the copy and paste. So let's see, do we want to do any sort of stylistic thing here? Like, do we want to bold this? Do we want to separate these two lines? I think we're just going to try it. So we've got a picture in there at the top, and then we've got our text. If we could also add a button, like if we wanted to take them to a particular page, like if we wanted to take them to the Apply Now page, which I think there is, and that might be a helpful. Here we go. Let's make a button just as an example. You can always feel free to take it off, but let's make a button that takes them to this Get Started page. So I'm going to grab the URL, and then I'm going to open up this and do a button. Look for a button module. So I think that this advanced button is the main button module that we've been using throughout the website. So we'll just give it a title and say Apply Now. Put it in the center, link it to this URL that we just copied, and we'll see what this looks like. We may need to change some of this styling, which I'll do after the video. I won't make you sit through all that. I also might have just a button in elements already. Okay, this looks like a button that we set up before. So let's just use the styles from this one potentially. We can put them both on here and just see what we like, which of these we like better. Apply now. Okay, so I'm going to publish this and let's take a look. Okay, so with that on, it should just come up. We'll see. I may have to clear cache, but I'll show you how to do that for testing purposes. Okay, so I definitely don't like that first button that was the standard one, so we can just get rid of that. Update. That button looks okay. It matches the buttons that are on the rest of the site. This text feels small to me. I think that what might, because that image is the full size, maybe the image is too distracting. So I'm going to test it without the image, and I'm also going to make this text bigger. So I'm going to select it all, and I'm going to turn it into a heading. So in this case, it's a H1 or a heading 1. Now here's where the clearing of the cache comes into play, because the cookie has gotten set. So if I do this and refresh, if I close this and refresh the page, it's not going to come back because the cookie got set. So what I need to do to get it to come back is two things. I need to clear the cache and the cookie. But I don't want to clear the WordPress cookie, otherwise I'll have to log in again. So here's what I do to clear both those things. First, I right click go to inspect, open up this thing. You don't need to use this at all. It's just that this thing I'm about to show you of how to clear the cache doesn't work unless you have this inspector open. So I've opened the inspector. Now with that, because that's open, I can go up to my refresh button and right click on that, and then I can hit empty cache and hard reload. That'll clear the cache of this page. Before I do that, I need to get rid of this cookie though. So if I click on this little lock icon and then go into cookies, I can scroll down to the UTower section, open up the cookies folder, and then what I'm looking for here is that PUM. This is that cookie name that we set on our pop-up settings. So if I hit remove there, and then right click empty cache, the pop-up should come back up with our new changes. Okay, this is closer to what I think makes the most sense. It like blocks out the rest of the page, it blurs it a little bit, it really puts your attention right on this message here. And I like that. I'm wondering if this should be, no, I was gonna ask myself if I wanted this section where the box is to actually have like a solid background, like a solid white background, which would just require like picking a different pop-up theme, which you can feel free to play with. But I actually like this. What I'm not liking about it is I think there needs to be a little bit of space between the title and the button. So let's take a look here. So we can add some space by adding a new element and then looking for empty space. And just guess to start, I'm going to think 64 pixels and then drag it in between those two elements. Hit update, and then same thing again here. Clear the cookie, remove, and clear the cache. I like this better. It's too wide though. Do you agree? I think that's too wide. So here we go back into display, size. We were on medium. Let's try small. And I'm gonna not close it. And then by not closing it, what that does is it doesn't drop the cookie, so I don't have to clear the cookie, or I don't have to, remove the cookie. I can just clear the cache and reload. Let's see if this looks. That's better. This is weird how it wraps a line. The button looks better. This message. What I'm debating is whether these should be split, whether they should be split farther apart, or whether it should all just be one sentence. I think I think it's gonna look better just all as one thing. Let's try. And then I'm just gonna kind of leave it, and then I'll show you how to turn these on and off. And I'm going to turn it off for now, and then that way, yeah, I think that looks better to me. I think I also want just like a little more space between the top and the close button. So I'm going to take that 64 pixels of space and duplicate it with this little clone button, drag it above that text, and then I think I'm probably just going to leave it here and then let you make any other changes that you want. I'm happy with this. Okay, so I'm gonna leave this for you to do any other tweaks you want. If you want some more specific style tweaks that are like over your head, then just let me know and I can take care of those for you. But for the most part, I think that should give you an idea of what you want to do with these promotional pop-ups. To turn them on and off, this would be the last thing, and then we'll call it good for this tutorial. So to turn them on and off is basically your published status. So you could turn them off by making them private, which would make it so that only you can see them when you're logged in. But probably the easier way is just to change them from published to draft. And so if they're in draft mode, they're not going to show up for you. They're not going to show up for anybody, but they'll still be back here. So what you don't want to do is delete them and have to recreate these every time. But to get them to just turn off, set their status to draft, hit update, and now you can still work on the back end of this without having it show on the front end of the website. You can change your content, you can change your settings, but in order to actually test them though, you're going to have to change the status back to published, which it'll do with this main button here, publish. If you want to save your changes without publishing, make sure you use the save draft button instead of the publish button. This is the main button that's trying to grab your attention. It is your update button when you are live with a pop-up or a post, and this will change from saying publish to saying update. So this is your main button, but if you don't want it to go live yet, don't hit the main button, hit the save draft button instead. Okay, so that was a lot longer than I was anticipating, so I'm going to leave it here and let you take it from there. And if you need a follow-up Q&A session, just let me know.